Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into the crooked heart of a medieval town, where stone streets twist like ribs through a body of timber houses, and the air at dusk carries that mix of horse dung, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of roasted chestnuts. You feel the weight of the day fading as lanterns flicker alive one by one, throwing trembling halos onto damp cobbles. The people who fill these alleys are in a hurry, their cloaks pulled tight, faces half hidden, because night in a medieval town is not the safe and dreamy thing it might be for you. No electric lights, no police cars humming past, just shadows deep enough to swallow anyone careless. And let's be blunt, you probably won't survive this kind of night unless you've learned to keep your head low and your wits sharper than the knives in a cut purse's belt. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And since I'm curious about who's listening right now, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where these journeys are reaching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the crooked alley, your shoes damp from a puddle where the gutter overflowed after the last rain. Above, crooked beams lean toward each other as if the houses are whispering secrets. Someone has hung a bundle of herbs from a lintel, a charm meant to ward off plague, though historians still argue whether such charms were faith, fashion, or desperate medicine. The alley bends into a courtyard that feels like a stage. Washing lines sway, chickens peck at shadows, and the stench of tanneries from beyond the wall mixes with incense leaking from a chapel. A dog slinks by with something stolen in its jaws, maybe a crust, maybe a rat every time. Ere you look, layers of story cling to the stones. Mainstream history will tell you these towns were hives of craft, smiths hammering, weavers spinning, but the fringe tidbit hiding in travellers' notes is stranger. Some believed spirits haunted intersections, which is why crude crosses are carved into the plaster at every corner you pass. And you can't help smirking at the irony. People feared invisible ghosts, yet ignored the very visible dangers of sewage flowing in shallow trenches at their feet. Don't slip. It's not exactly the spa treatment you came for. From the tavern window, a lute plays a tune you half recognize, carried on the breeze with laughter that could be joy or menace. The sound jars against the groaning of a cart wheel as a merchant packs up unsold apples, muttering curses about taxes. You notice his apprentice sneaking 2 apples into a wicker basket. Maybe survival demands its own morality. That detail sticks in your mind because later, when you're haggling over your own scraps of dignity, you'll remember how everyone is cutting corners just to stay alive. Night deepens, stars blur behind smoke, and you catch a glimpse of torchlight moving down the main road. The city guard, clumsy, half-drunk, their chainmail jingling like bells, make their rounds. You know the truth. They're less interested in keeping peace and more in collecting bribes. You shrink further into the alley, your candle stub pressed close, casting just enough glow to guide you but not enough to draw attention. It's here, in this very moment of arrival, that you settle into the rhythm of the night, alert but weary, cautious yet resigned. The air is damp, the stones cold underfoot, and behind every shutter a dozen eyes watch, judge, or pity, and you, stepping into this crooked heart of the town, already feel the story curling around you like smoke, an endless night where survival itself is the only performance that matters. You push open the crooked wooden door of your chamber, and the hinges creak as though they're sighing at your return. Inside, the air is warmer, but hardly inviting. It's a stew of candle smoke, sweat, and the faint tang of last night's spilled wine. A single candle stub burns on the table, dripping wax into a hardened pool like a frozen waterfall. You set down your sparse belongings, a shawl smelling faintly of rosemary, a wooden comb with more splinters than teeth, and a pewter cup that always tastes faintly of iron. This is your world condensed into a few objects, each one a lifeline in a city where ownership is as fragile as promises. From the next room, gossip hums through thin wooden walls. Two women giggle, voices muffled but still carrying that tone of weary mischief. They trade stories of clients as though swapping riddles. The baker with flour on his boots, the merchant who can't count past 3 coins. The humour is brittle, but it keeps despair at bay. Historians still argue whether brothel communities were tight-knit families or tense rivalries, but the truth you feel through these walls is that laughter is the glue, even when it's cracked and uneven. You sit on the edge of your straw bed. The mattress crunches under you, filled with husks that smell faintly of the harvest fields you once knew. That's the cruel joke of the night. You sleep on the memory of a field you may never see again. Your hands trace the rough blanket, patched with scraps of teal and russet cloth, gifts from clients who pretended generosity while hiding greed. The blanket scratches your skin, but it's better than the cold. A flicker of candlelight dances on the low-beamed ceiling. You imagine for a moment that it's gold leaf from a holy book, but no. This is no illuminated manuscript, just soot staining wood. Still, your mind finds comfort in the fantasy. You chuckle softly at yours. Elf, who knew that soot could pass for divine decoration? There's one of your 3 jokes for the night. Don't worry, you'll need the others to make it through. You shift to the window, pushing open the warped shutter. The alley outside is hushed now, only the sound of a stray cat yowling and the faint drip of water into a barrel. The moon hovers like a pale coin no one can reach. You lean out, feeling the chill air brush your cheek. Somewhere a lute strikes a wrong note, followed by a burst of drunken laughter, proof that the night belongs to chaos more than order. You return to the small table where the candle is nearly gone. You take a charcoal stub and scratch marks onto the wood, tallies that don't mean much but give you the illusion of control. Mainstream history says many medieval women could not write, but the quirky truth is that some scratched symbols, charms, or even astrological doodles onto wood and parchment, tiny rebellions against silence. You mark an X, then another, pretending it's a star chart of your fate. You mutter half to yourself, if only the stars took bribes. Joke number 2, don't say I didn't keep count. The walls thrum again with conversation. One woman coughs, a harsh, wet sound. You pause. The candle sputters, and the room seems to lean closer, as if listening. That cough is a reminder, the kind of reminder that sends a chill through you more than the draft. Illness spreads fast here, faster than rumours, and you never know which one kills quicker. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and force yourself to look away from the door, because there's no cure to offer, only prayers. Finally, you stretch out on the bed. The straw pokes your skin, the candle dies, and the gossip fades into whispers. Your chamber is no palace, but it is a stage, and tonight you'll play your part again, whether with charm, defiance, or weary silence. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the heartbeat of the town through thin walls, and prepare for the knock you know will come before long. The night grows heavier, pressing down on the crooked alley outside like a damp wool cloak. You rise from your bed, restless, and open the warped shutter once more. The marketplace just beyond the bend has finally quieted. Earlier it rattled with vendors shouting over one another, but now all that remains is the echo of wooden stalls being folded shut. You catch the sound of clattering hooves as the last few carts roll across uneven cobblestones. Their wheels groan like old men's knees, and sparks flash when iron rims scrape against loose stones. For a heartbeat, you almost believe the town has gone silent, but listen closely. There is no true silence in a medieval city. The whispers of the street are layered, a mutter of 2 figures haggling in the dark over a side deal, the faint scrape of a blade being tested, the mewl of a cat hunting scraps in the gutters. Somewhere far off, a baby cries, carried through narrow lanes like a distant bird call. Mainstream history records markets as centres of trade buzzing with commerce and opportunity, but in this hour you see the other side, the leftovers, the scavengers, the desperate ones working in shadows. Historians still argue whether the night market was simply an extension of the day or whether it became its own parallel world. From where you stand, there's no argument. It feels like another city entirely, one stitched with threads of secrecy. A gust of wind scatters refuse across the street, onion peels, broken rushes, a bruised apple rolling into a puddle. You smirk at the sight. Even the apple can't resist a late-night bath, you mutter, offering yourself joke number 1 for this section. Humour is flimsy armour, but it keeps you upright. You spot a cloaked figure carrying a wicker basket moving quickly, shoulders hunched, perhaps a baker's apprentice sneaking dough for tomorrow, or perhaps something else entirely. The candles glow, every shadow seems guilty. You lean your elbows on the sill, absorbing the mood of the town. The wooden beams overhead creak with the weight of night birds, crows perhaps, though you can't quite see them. Their silhouettes shift against the moonlight. Below, a group of men shuffle past, their boots scuffing the stones. Their speech is slurred, voices weaving together in half-songs. You hear the metallic chime of a coin purse, half empty now, no doubt. You imagine tomorrow's regret painted on their faces when daylight arrives. A fringe tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Some chroniclers noted that townsfolk hung small bells or charms from stalls to scare off thieves and spirits alike. And as you squint down the lane, you see one such trinket swinging, a tiny bronze charm shaped like a fish. It jingles softly in the wind, a sound more delicate than any lute string. Whether it guards against men or demons, you can't say, but its persistence gives you a brief smile. Maybe you should hang one outside your own door, though it would more likely annoy than protect. Joke number 2 delivered. From the far end of the street comes the heavy stomp of a horse. A lone rider approaches slowly, torchlight flickering against his russet cloak. His face is hooded, but his posture screams weariness. He does not glance left or right, only pushes forward, hoofbeats echoing against the walls. The glow paints every crack in the stone, every jagged shadow on the timber frames. You hold your breath, not daring to move, until he passes. Historians still argue whether townsfolk felt safer with mounted watchmen or whether their presence inspired just as much fear as comfort. Tonight, the latter feels more believable. The rider disappears into the mist ahead, leaving the street again to its strange rhythm. A drunk stumbles into view, clutching at the shutter of a closed stall. And nearly topples into the gutter. He mutters curses at the absent stall keeper, blaming him for empty pockets. You can't help but laugh softly. There's joke number 3, gifted to you by fate itself. You close the shutter gently, returning the room to its dim cocoon of candlelight. The market may have quieted, but its aftertaste lingers, an echo of hooves, whispers, and laughter, woven together into the tapestry of another restless night. The candle on your table has burned low, its flame a thin, trembling thread when the sound comes. A knock. Not the confident pounding of authority, not the sly tap of a thief. This one is hesitant, almost apologetic. You freeze for a moment, hand resting on the rough wood, as if by waiting you could erase the sound. But it comes again, firmer this time, the sort of knock that belongs to someone balancing shame and need in equal measure. You draw in a breath, tugging your shawl tighter, and shuffle to the door. When you lift the latch, it creaks like an old man's spine. There, half in shadow, stands a man no older than 30, though worry has carved lines across his forehead. His teal tunic looks freshly laundered, but too thin for the chill. He clutches a leather pouch close to his chest, knuckles pale. His eyes dart, not at you, but at the street behind him, checking whether anyone has noticed his shameful errand. You sigh softly, always the same fear, as though the entire town weren't already gossiping by morning. "Come in," you whisper, and he obeys, stepping gingerly across the threshold as though the floor might collapse under him. His boots track in mud, and you grimace. "There's your first joke tonight," muttered under your breath. "Ah, a gift of free dirt. Just what I needed." He doesn't laugh. Men seldom do at the start. Inside, the chamber seems smaller with him in it, the candlelight cutting harsh lines across his anxious face. He sets the pouch on the table, and a muffled clink betrays coins inside, but he doesn't open it yet, only stares at the floorboards as though they might offer absolution. Mainstream histories often describe such men as faceless clients blurred into numbers and transactions. Yet here, in the cramped space of your room, every twitch of his hands tells a fuller story. This isn't lust alone, but loneliness, or maybe fear disguised as longing. Historians still argue whether medieval men sought these rooms for pleasure, for comfort, or simply because marriage laws bound them too tightly. Standing here, you could argue all three at once. You pull out a wooden stool, the one that wobbles on its short leg, and motion for him to sit. He hesitates before lowering himself, still clutching the pouch like it might be stolen from him. You light another candle, its smoke spiraling upward, and the shadows shift to reveal more of him. A patch on his sleeve, a broken shoelace, a faint scar along his jaw. He clears his throat, but says nothing. The silence stretches until you decide to break it, remarking, "If you hold that pouch any tighter, it'll squeal." There's joke number 2, tossed gently across the table, and at last his mouth twitches in the smallest of smiles. He loosens the string and spills the coins onto the wood. Not many, enough to pass the night, barely. You eye them, then him, calculating the balance between generosity and survival. He notices your gaze and blurts, "It's all I have." His voice is hoarse, carrying both truth and performance. You know better than to untangle them. Fringe accounts whisper of women in your trade who acted as confessors more than companions, listening to secrets that priests would never dare touch. You see it now in his lowered eyes. He has come not only to spend coins, but to shed weight. You lean back against the wall, arms folded, letting the moment stretch. Outside, another set of hooves clatters past, the rhythm echoing through the alley, but neither of you moves. The candle crackles, smoke curling toward the low ceiling. Finally, wow, you speak, voice soft but steady. You're safe here, for tonight at least. And though you mean it partly for him, you hear the words echoing back at yourself, and you're not sure who needs them more. The knock that began as a nuisance now lingers as a reminder that every sound at the door can redraw the night. Sometimes it brings danger, sometimes comfort, sometimes nothing but mud on the floorboards. But always it is the hinge on which survival swings. The man sits hunched on the stool, his pouch of coins now scattered across the table like fallen teeth. You reach for a clay jug tucked into the corner and pour a measure of sour red wine into a chipped pewter cup. It sloshes unevenly, staining your fingers as you hand it over. He takes it with both hands, as though it were some sacred chalice, and sips quickly, coughing at the acidity. You smirk. Don't worry, it only tastes like horse vinegar after the first 3 gulps. That's your first joke tonight, tossed gently to break his tension, though the truth is the wine could strip paint off a cartwheel. You pour some for yourself and raise the cup in mock ceremony. The liquid burns your throat and you feel the warmth bloom in your chest, a small fire against the night's draught. The man sets his cup down and stares at the coins, hesitant. Negotiation is its own ritual here. He offers fewer, you demand more, and somewhere between guilt and desperation the price lands. Mainstream histories call it bargaining, but the real nuance is theatre, each of you playing roles rehearsed countless times. Historians still argue whether women in your trade held the stronger hand in these moments, wielding control through choice, or whether the weight of survival crushed that illusion. Standing here, you feel both truths pressing together. He slides 3 coins toward you, then pauses, eyes darting to your face for judgment. You let them sit a moment longer than necessary, enjoying the suspense before nudging one back with your fingertip. "I'm not here to bankrupt you," you murmur, though you know very well that survival demand. This generosity only when it doesn't hurt too much. He exhales, shoulders loosening, and you sip again, savouring the wine less for taste than for the way it steadies your nerves. The candlelight flickers against the walls, illuminating a small wooden shelf where you've stored dried herbs in clay pots: sage, lavender, rosemary. They're less about medicine and more about courage. You sprinkle a pinch of lavender into the wine jug, stirring with a wooden spoon. The scent rises, masking the sharpness of the sour drink. A quirky tidbit you once heard from an older woman in the house comes to mind. Some swore that lavender not only softened wine, but also softened hearts, making men less likely to rage. Joke number 2 slips out as you mutter, "If only it worked on the city bailiff." The man chuckles weakly, finally meeting your eyes. For the first time, he looks less like a stranger and more like someone ordinary, just trying to carve out a pocket of warmth in a world that's mostly cold. You sip again and feel the faintest buzz spreading, though it's hardly pleasant. It's the kind of wine that leaves a headache before it gives you joy. Still, the ritual matters. Sharing a drink is its own contract, older than law, binding two people under the same shadow. From outside, a dog barks and a cart rattles past, breaking the fragile quiet. You glance toward the shutter, but the night beyond remains unreadable. The man clears his throat and shifts uneasily. He speaks of little things: his work at the tannery, the stink of hides, the taxes that eat more than his wage. His words tumble out as though the wine has unlocked them, and you listen with half a smile. History's chroniclers rarely noted these men's voices, yet here, in the small glow of candlelight, their grievances sound like the heartbeat of the town itself. Finally, you lean back and let the wine's warmth wrap around your bourse-ness. Negotiation has ended, the pact sealed with coin and sour drink. For a fleeting moment, the chamber feels almost like a tavern corner rather than a rented cell of survival. You think wryly, cheers to bad wine and worse decisions. Joke number 3 lands softly in the room, and though the laugh it earns is small, it's enough to remind you both that even in the darkest nights, humour keeps the shadows at bay. The sour wine lingers on your tongue, but now you reach for something gentler. From a wicker basket tucked beneath the table, you pull sprigs of rosemary and a small vial of rose oil. The air in your chamber smells of sweat and damp straw, and you know too well that scent can shape a man's mood faster than coin. You drizzle a few drops of the oil into a bronze dish and set it near the candle flame. A soft fragrance unfurls, delicate yet insistent, masking the roughness of the night. You gather herbs from your small stash: sage leaves, lavender, a pinch of dried mint. Crushing them between your palms releases oils that cling to your skin, earthy and sharp. You smear them along your wrists, neck, and the edge of your shawl, creating a cloud of scent meant to rewrite the truth of this chamber. Mainstream accounts tell us medieval folk doused themselves in perfumes to hide the lack of bathing. That's partly true, but the quirky detail, rarely written down, is that some believed rosemary smoke could keep evil spirits from crawling into the lungs. Joke number 1 slips out under your breath: if only rosemary could keep landlords away too. The man watches, uncertain, as you perform this little ritual. To him it may seem exotic, even sacred, though you know it's mostly necessity dressed up as art. You hand him a sprig of mint, suggesting he chew it. He obeys, grimacing at the bitterness. You grin: better bitter breath than no teeth at all, offering joke number 2, and he chuckles nervously, chewing faster. The chamber fills with fragrance, and for a moment you almost believe it works. The sour tang of wine fades beneath the floral veil, and the staleness of straw softens. You lift a small bronze spoon and stir ash into the oil, creating a smoky haze that drifts lazily toward the rafters. Outside, footsteps echo down the alley, accompanied by laughter too sharp to be kind. You tense until the voices pass, then release the breath you didn't know you were holding. Historians still argue whether such practices were truly medicinal or merely ritual. Was lavender actually calming, or did people simply believe it was enough to soothe themselves into peace? You suspect it hardly matters. Belief is its own medicine, at least until the night knocks harder than you can bear. The man beside you breathes deeper now, shoulders loosening as though the fragrance has untied knots in his chest. You glance at the ceiling beams dark with soot from years of candles and imagine them as the painted arches of a grand cathedral perfumed by incense instead of herbs. For a heartbeat, your cramped chamber transforms, your role less a survivor and more a priestess of small comforts. That illusion is fragile, but tonight it is yours. The man sips again from his cup, this time slower, savouring rather than choking. He watches you sprinkle another pinch of herbs into the fire. You see a flicker of wonder in his eyes, a childlike awe that makes you smile. You lean back against the wall, stretching your legs across the straw bed, and quip softly, "If the bishop could smell this room now, he'd excommunicate us both for smelling too holy." Joke number 3 drifts into the air with the smoke, and even you laugh at its absurdity. The scents settle, mingling into a haze that clings to your hair, your clothes, the cracked walls. Outside, the alley belongs to shadows, but inside, for this moment, you have created a softer world, one where rose and rosemary reign over sweat and fear. A temporary kingdom of fragrance, fragile but real, carved out by your own hands in a night that rarely offers gentleness. The room's hazy perfume still clings to your hair when the sound of heavy boots on stone pulls you toward the shutter. You creep closer, careful not to let the candlelight spill too far. Down the alley, the glow of torches flickers against damp walls, casting long shadows that lurch like giants across crooked beams. The city guards are making their rounds. You can hear the jingle of chainmail, the clatter of spear tips striking cobblestone, and the low murmur of voices slurred with drink. You step back instinctively, pressing against the rough plaster wall. Everyone knows the guards are as dangerous as the thieves they're meant to chase. Mainstream chronicles claim they kept order, patrolling streets to protect townsfolk from crime. But you know the truth whispered in side stories. They were often little more than hired bullies, their loyalty swaying with coin. Historians still argue whether their presence reassured or terrorized citizens. To you, crouched in your dim room, the answer feels simple enough. The man on the stool stiffens, eyes darting to the door. His hand hovers near the coins he'd spilled earlier, as if fearing they'll be stolen by torchlight alone. You whisper for him to be still, your voice low, your breath warm against the musty air. Outside, the guards pause, and for a dreadful moment, the light lingers just outside your shutter. You can almost feel the heat of the flame through the wood. One guard coughs, another spits. Their laughter breaks out suddenly, rowdy and sharp, before they shuffle on down the lane. You exhale slowly, letting your shoulders relax. "Nothing like a patrol to make the wine taste better," you mutter, tipping your cup toward the door. That's your first joke tonight, weak but serviceable, and it earns a nervous grin from your guest. The tension fades, though only slightly. You know too many stories, men dragged from beds for bribes unpaid, women fined for nothing more than existing in the wrong alley at the wrong hour. The guards' torches glow faintly farther down the street, tiny suns shrinking into the night. Still, the echo of their boots feels tattooed onto your nerves. You turn back to the table, refilling your guest's cup. The candle's flame dances wildly, disturbed by the draft sneaking under the door. You sprinkle more herbs onto the dish, though this time it feels less about fragrance and more about protection. A quirky tidbit rises in your mind. Some swore juniper branches kept evil, and sometimes even guards at bay, so women would hang sprigs near the lintel. You've no juniper tonight, but you imagine the sprig there anyway, and for a heartbeat it comforts you. The man finally speaks, voice low. They frighten me more than thieves. His words stumble out, awkward but honest. You nod. That's because thieves only want your purse. Guards want your soul too. Joke number 2, and this time he actually chuckles, though it dies quickly in his throat. The torches vanish completely now, leaving only the silver of moonlight seeping through cracks. You listen to the silence that follows, a silence somehow louder than their noise. It feels as though the town itself holds its breath after each patrol, waiting to see if order has been restored or merely bruised. Historians debate whether these nightly rounds reduced crime. You can't help thinking they simply relocated it, shifting danger from alley to uniform. You sit once more on the edge of your straw bed, pulling the shawl tighter around your shoulders. The man drains his cup, his hands finally less tense. You allow yourself a smile, remarking lightly, "If we're lucky, their next stop will be the tavern, and then the only law tonight will be ale." That's joke number 3, softer, but it lands well enough. The chamber settles again into its fragile cocoon. Outside, the law marches drunkenly through the night, but inside, for the moment, the danger has passed. Still, you know the truth. The guards may walk on, but their shadow never truly leaves. The guards' footsteps fade into silence, but the unease they left behind lingers. You sit back at the table, staring at the candle as if its flickering flame might wash away the tension. Instead, your thoughts wander to the small chapel tucked at the far end of the alley, a chapel you sometimes slip into when the weight of nights like these presses too hard. The memory drifts over you now, as vivid as if you'd just left it. You picture the narrow stone building half hidden by ivy, its wooden door always cracked open. Inside, smoke from tallow candles curls against the vaulted ceiling, thick enough to sting your eyes. The scent of incense clings to your shawl long after you leave, mingling with the rosemary and rose oil you use to mask other truths. Mainstream histories say chapels were safe havens, places of mercy for the weary, but you know their mercy is tangled, conditional and sharp. Historians still argue whether priests truly offered compassion to women of your trade, or whether sermons were little more than polished condemnations. The priest in this chapel is a stern man, his black robe stiff as his spine. His face, pale and lined, is forever locked between disappointment and exhaustion. You remember kneeling there once, your knees pressed to cold stone, whispering half-confessions while his voice droned overhead. He wagged a finger like a schoolmaster, condemning the sins he believed stained you beyond repair. Yet when the service ended, he looked almost relieved that you'd shown up at all, as though your presence justified his warnings. A quirky tidbit floats into your memory. Some towns whispered that confessions from women like you were secretly used to entertain priests during their cloistered meals, tales passed around like riddles. Whether true or not, you can't see. Hake the suspicion when his brow furrows deeper than your words warrant. You almost smirk, remembering it now. Joke number 1 slips from your lips. Imagine priests laughing at our sins over their stew, beats listening to each other snore. In your mind, you see the wooden pews, worn smooth by generations of knees. You remember touching the edge of the altar, your fingertips grazing the gilded crucifix. It glowed faintly in candlelight, a reminder of promises you were told you'd already broken. For a moment, you dared to hope it offered some kind of blessing anyway. Then the priest's cough shattered the illusion, pulling you back into judgment. The man in your chamber shifts, watching you drift in thought. You explain softly, "Sometimes I go to the chapel, just to listen, not for forgiveness, not really, just to remember what forgiveness is supposed to sound like." He nods slowly, as though he understands more than he says, his eyes lower, perhaps weighed down by his own unspoken confessions. You chuckle, shaking your head. "Once I nearly fell asleep during a sermon, and when the priest scolded me, I told him it was proof his words were soothing." Joke number 2, and this one earns a genuine laugh from your guest, sharp and sudden but welcome. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters and you wonder if the chapel door is groaning in the same gust. Maybe candles are still burning there, their wax dripping in silence while the priest mutters prayers for souls like yours. Historians debate whether such prayers were honest or obligatory. You suspect both, depending on how much wine the priest had with dinner. You lean back against the wall, speaking to the shadows more than to your guest. We're all confessing to someone, aren't we? Some to priests, some to each other, some to the night itself. The words hang heavy, then fade. Finally, you smile faintly and murmur, "Still, I'll keep going. If nothing else, the candles are cheaper than perfume." That's joke number 3, dry and small, but it carries enough to ease the weight in the room. The memory of the chapel fades, replaced again by the flickering light of your single candle, yet the echo of stern warnings lingers in your chest, as though the priest's voice followed you home. The priest's voice still lingers in your ears when the sound of quiet laughter seeps through the thin walls again. It's a different kind of laughter this time, not mocking, not forced, but tired and warm, like embers that refuse to die. You push the door open into the narrow corridor, and soon you find yourself drawn into the common chamber where a few women have gathered. The room is dim, lit by a single iron lamp hung from a crooked beam. 3 of them sit on the floor, skirts pooled around their legs, breaking stale bread and dipping it into a wooden bowl of broth. The air smells of garlic and smoke, but it's better than nothing. They motion for you to join, and you do, sliding down beside them. A scrap of russet cloth cushions the straw mat, softer than your own bed. You tear a piece of bread, the crust hard enough to crack a tooth, and share in the ritual. Mainstream accounts often painted women like you as rivals clawing for clients and coin. Yet in this dim space, rivalry gives way to something else, sisterhood born of hunger, weariness, and survival. Historians still argue whether such solidarity was real or romanticized. You glance at the woman beside you, her cheek swollen from a man's drunken blow, and decide there's no debate. Loyalty is carved out of necessity. They whisper secrets, voices low, as though the walls themselves might carry gossip back to the street. One leans in close, recounting how she tricked a stingy client into paying double by pretending the guard was at the door. Another tells of hiding coins in the hem of her teal gown, safe from the madam's watchful eye. You laugh softly, choking on breadcrumbs, and mutter, "The madam counts faster than the priest's rosary beads." That's your first joke of the night, met with muffled chuckles. You share a small secret of your own, how you sprinkled lavender into wine earlier, convincing a nervous man it was a noble's remedy. Their laughter bubbles louder at that, one of them teasing, "Careful, or you'll be charging apothecary prices." Joke number 2 floats effortlessly, wrapped in camaraderie rather than sarcasm. A quirky tidbit surfaces from your memory. In some towns, women of your trade would form alliances not only for protection, but to pool money for candles in local chapels, hoping prayers paid in wax might soften their fate. You mention this, and one woman snorts, "I'd rather buy cheese than candles." The group erupts into quiet giggles, and for a moment the bleakness of night lifts. The bread dwindles, the broth cools, and still you sit together, shoulders brushing, the comfort of presence outweighing hunger. You look around at their faces, lined, bruised, yet still alive, and feel something close to pride. Joke number 3 slips from your lips, half-whispered, If laughter were coin, we'd all be rich by dawn. The women nod, smiling in agreement, each clinging to the fragile wealth of the moment. Outside, the wind howls, rattling shutters and shaking loose bits of plaster. But inside, the warmth of shared bread and whispered secrets forms a fragile fortress. The world may never write your names in ledgers of glory, but tonight, huddled together in the half-light, you belong to each other. And that, you think, is a kind of history too. The laughter fades, leaving behind the steady rhythm of chewing and the occasional sigh. When the last crumbs of bread are gone, the women drift back to their chambers one by one, leaving you alone with the flickering iron lamp. Your stomach growls, a hollow reminder that shared bread is never quite enough. You slip back into your own room and from beneath your bed pull out a small cloth bundle, your hidden midnight feast. You spread the cloth across the table like it's a nobleman's banquet cloth, though what you lay upon it would hardly impress any lord. A hunk of stale bread, 2 dried figs, and a strip of salted fish curled stiff from age. The smell alone could raise the dead, but you shrug and mutter, better a smelly feast than an empty belly. There's your first joke, dry as the bread itself. You tear off a piece of fish and chew carefully, the salt burning your tongue, forcing you to sip from the wine again despite its vinegar sting. The candle throws shadows across the wall, and for a moment the shapes resemble feast hall banners fluttering in the wind. You imagine yourself seated at a long wooden table, golden platters of roasted meats before you, and servants hurrying to refill cups. A quirky tidbit drifts into memory. Some accounts say medieval nobles served up to 7 courses in a single meal, complete with swan or peacock dressed in its own feathers. You chuckle at the thought. Here you are gnawing at dried fish while some baron chews swan drumsticks. The man still seated in your chamber eyes your bundle curiously. You break off a piece of bread and toss it his way. He catches it clumsily, takes a bite, then laughs at his own grimace. Hard enough to build a wall with, he mutters. You grin and reply, good thing the city could use new walls. Joke number 2 slips easily, and even in the dim room it sparks a small warmth. Your jaw aches from the stays. Lee crust, but hunger insists you finish. You balance each bite with sips of wine, the mix leaving you light-headed, though not pleasantly so. The salted fish makes your lips crack, and you lick them clean, savouring what little nourishment the meal provides. Outside, the night groans with distant tavern songs and the shuffle of late wanderers, but in here you create a fragile sense of celebration, no matter how meagre. Historians still argue whether people of your station ever tasted luxury beyond scraps. Some say feast days brought even the poorest a taste of meat or sweet. Others claim that survival rarely stretched to celebration. As you chew on your last fig, you find yourself siding with the latter. Still, in this moment, chewing dried fruit that clings to your teeth, you allow yourself the illusion of plenty. The man wipes crumbs from his tunic and leans back on the stool. He sighs, not out of despair, but from the rare comfort of sharing food with someone, even if it's meagre. The candlelight softens the sharp lines of his face, making him look younger, less worn. You smile faintly, thinking how even scraps can turn into communion when eaten together. At last, you fold the cloth, shaking away crumbs, and tuck it back under your bed. The fish bones you toss into a wooden bucket in the corner. The room smells sharper now, salt and smoke mixing with the herbs still smouldering. You raise your cup one last time and murmur, here's to feasts that don't break teeth. Joke number 3, whispered like a toast, and it lingers in the air long after the cup empties. Your belly isn't full, but it's quiet enough for now. The night stretches onward, and the silence after eating feels like a small mercy. You sink back onto your bed, letting your eyes half close, waiting for whatever or whoever knocks next. Your eyelids have only just begun to droop when the sound of footsteps announces a new arrival. Not the hesitant shuffle of a nervous labourer, not the cautious tap you heard earlier, but a thunderous pounding on the door that rattles the hinges. You sit up straight, already knowing the type before you open the latch. When the door swings wide, in staggers a nobleman, his indigo cloak sweeping dust across the floor, a golden chain glinting at his chest. His cheeks are flushed with wine, his laughter booming before you can speak. He tosses a handful of coins across the room, the silver clinking as they scatter like hailstones against the straw. "More than enough," he slurs, his words tumbling into each other like drunkards in a tavern brawl. You glance at the money. Yes, more than enough, but also dangerous. Nobles can give freely, but they can take back twice as fast if displeased. Mainstream histories often record nobles as patrons of taverns, brothels, and feasts, indulging without restraint. Yet here you see the edge of the coin. Generosity soured by arrogance. Historians still argue whether their patronage was a blessing for women like you or simply another chain of control. Looking at this man, you already lean toward the latter. He flings himself onto the straw bed without waiting for permission, boots still on, crushing the blanket you patched with scraps. His laughter echoes too loud for the narrow chamber. You mutter under your breath, "At least he's rich enough to pay for repairs." That's joke number one, though the man is too busy fumbling with his cloak to hear. You pour him wine, and he seizes the cup with both hands, gulping as though it were spring water. Red dribbles down his chin, staining his golden chain. He laughs again, then declares some tale about hunting boar by moonlight, though the way he wobbles suggests the boar might have had the upper hand. And you nod politely, biting back the thought. The only beast you've caught tonight is yourself. Joke number two, this time whispered for your own amusement. He reaches into his cloak and pulls out a trinket, a dagger with an ornate hilt polished to a shine. He brandishes it proudly, boasting of battles fought, though you suspect it's seen more kitchens than battlefields. A quirky tidbit flickers in your mind. Some nobles carry decorative blades solely for show, their value more in jewels than steel. You smile faintly, watching him wave it dangerously close to the candle flame. The room tilts under his presence. He sprawls across the bed, arms wide, demanding attention not with words but with sheer volume. His laugh booms again, startling the man still seated on the stool, who shrinks into the corner, clutching his cup like a shield. You step between them subtly, guiding the noble's gaze away, smoothing the air with practiced ease. Historians debate whether noblemen sought out such chambers for indulgence or for the thrill of lowering themselves into common life. Tonight, as the coins glint on your table and the laughter threatens to split your ears, it feels like both. He is a peacock among sparrows, strutting even as he topples feathers. You refill his cup again, watching his eyelids droop between fits of laughter. Soon the wine will do its work, softening the booming into snores. You mutter lightly, if he sleeps here, at least the floorboards won't creak under his voice. Joke number three said softly as you collect scattered coins from the floor. The chamber feels smaller, filled with too much sound, too much presence. Yet the silver on the table gleams like captured moonlight, and you know it may be the only thing to outlast him. So you breathe deep. Let the perfume herbs battle the stench of his sweat and wait for the nobleman's laughter to dissolve into the heavy rhythm of drunken sleep. The nobleman's laughter eventually fades into uneven snores, leaving the chamber filled with the smell of wine and sweat. You slide the coins into a small pouch, careful not to jingle them too loudly. The man on the stool, your first guest of the evening, still lingers, watching with uneasy eyes. You offer him a shrug as if to say, "This is the way of knights here," though inside you know it's always a gamble which kind of man will stagger through your door. The room grows quiet, but your mind drifts to darker worries. You rub your hands together, noticing the faint rash that never quite fades. Too many whispers fill the air these days, whispers of unseen sickness spreading through town. Mainstream history calls it the pox, the fever, or simply the bad air. Yet the truth is murkier. Historians still argue whether people understood it as disease, curse, or punishment from God. For you, it's not theory, it's fear that scratches at your skin with every cough you hear in the street. You rise and fetch a small bowl from under the bed, filling it with water from a clay jug. The liquid is already cloudy, dust clinging to its surface. You dip a rag and wipe your arms, scrubbing as though you could wash away not only dirt, but fate itself. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some women carried dried frog skins as charms against disease, believing the animal's power absorbed sickness before it reached the body. You almost laugh at the thought. Better a frog in your pocket than a fever in your bed, you murmur. Joke number 1 muttered into the stillness. Your guest shifts uneasily, asking, "Is it true the sickness comes from touch?" His voice trembles, and you can tell he wants reassurance more than truth. You offer a wry smile. If it did, half the town would already be dead. Joke number 2, dark but enough to earn a nervous chuckle. Still, the silence that follows weighs heavier than laughter. Outside, a muffled cough echoes down the alley. You freeze, listening, your skin prickling. The cough grows harsher, followed by footsteps dragging against the cobblestones. You inch toward the shutter and peer through the crack. A man stumbles past, his face ghostly pale, clutching his chest as though trying to hold his ribs together. He spits into the gutter, and even from here you see the dark stain left behind. You pull back quickly, heart pounding, and slam the shutter closed. Historians debate whether townsfolk recognized contagion in moments like these or dismissed it as ordinary sickness. Watching the man disappear into shadow, you feel the truth in your bones. Fear spreads faster than fevers. And yet, life inside these walls goes on as if denial were the strongest shield of all. You return to the table, wiping your damp hands on your shawl. The nobleman snores louder, oblivious, sprawled across your bed. The guest on the stool avoids your eyes, chewing nervously at his lip. You force a smile, raising the empty cup as if toasting the night. "Here's to surviving until morning," you say, your third joke, though your voice is softer than before. The chamber smells of sour wine, burnt herbs, and now something sharper, the scent of fear, invisible but heavy as smoke. You sit back down, pulling the shawl around you tighter, and wait, knowing that beyond the walls the sickness prowls the streets like a beast hunting for its next breath. The nobleman snores on, sprawled like a fallen statue, his golden chain tangled against your patched blanket. The man on the stool dozes uneasily, his chin jerking up every time his head dips too low. You sit alone at the table, staring at the single candle as it gnaws its way shorter. Beside it lies the ledger, a thick book bound in cracked leather, edges darkened by years of hands and candle soot. It is not yours, not really. It belongs to the madam, but tonight it rests here, demanding your attention. You open it carefully, the spine groaning, and see the marks scratched inside, names, amounts, dates, all recorded with merciless precision. Your own name appears more than once, written in brown ink, each entry followed by tidy sums. The sight sends a chill across your shoulders. Mainstream history describes brothels as organized houses, almost like businesses, and this ledger proves it. Your life boiled down to neat lines, just another account among dozens. Historians still argue whether such records gave women a semblance of legitimacy or whether they were nothing more than shackles of ink. Sitting here, you know which answer weighs heavier. You run your finger along the page, feeling the grooves where the quill pressed too hard. Each mark is a reminder. Every coin you earn is already claimed, every hour accounted for. You whisper dryly, "At least I'll be remembered, if only as arithmetic." That's joke number 1, bitter but true. The candle sputters, and you glance at the nobleman. He stirs, mutters nonsense, then rolls over, his snores resuming. You shake your head, jotting another mark beside his name, though you know he'll never remember how much he gave nor care. The madam will count it, not you, and whatever remains will shrink after deductions, food, bedding, wine, even candles. A quirky tidbit flickers in your thoughts. In some towns, women owed fines if the used too much candle wax, as though light itself was a privilege. You glance at your dwindling flame and laugh softly. Imagine being charged for brightness, you murmur. Joke number 2 slips into the shadows. The man on the stool stirs awake, watching you write. "What's that?" he asks, his voice groggy. You close the ledger quickly, pressing a palm over the cover. "Just numbers," you answer. He frowns, then nods, perhaps relieved not to know more. Some truths are too heavy to share. You tap the quill against the table, ink smudging your fingers. Historians debate whether women who could write were rare or more common than records admit. The truth likely hides between literacy for survival, not luxury. For you, the quill is less tool, more tether, every mark binding you tighter to the house. You lean back, stretching your arms, staring at the ceiling beams blackened with soot. "Funny," you mutter. "I've been written about more times in this book than in any prayer." Joke number 3, whispered into the stale air, and it makes you smile despite yourself. You close the ledger, sliding it beneath the table as though hiding it might loosen its grip. But you know it waits, patient and heavy, ready to swallow the next set of numbers. And you, like every other name inside, are trapped between its covers. Ink on a page, a sum in the margins, a ghost pressed flat by quill and candle. The ledger sits hidden beneath the table, but its weight clings to your thoughts long after you've pushed it out of sight. You pour the last of the sour wine into your cup, swirling it idly, when the low murmur of voices drifts in from the alley. At first you think it's another patrol, and your shoulders stiffen. But the tones are different, faster, sharper, thick with unease. You creep toward the shutter, prying it open just enough to let moonlight and sound slip inside. 3 men huddle near the tavern door across the way, their cloaks pulled tight against the chill. They lean close, their words rising and falling like waves, punctuated by nervous glances over their shoulders. You catch fragments. Plague in the next town. Black swellings, 3 dead in a single house. The words send a prickle across your skin, colder than the wind sneaking through the shutters. Mainstream history records plague as an all-consuming wave, rolling from city to city. But here, at its edges, it begins as rumor, a whisper traveling faster than any rat. Historians still argue whether gossip spread more terror than the disease itself. Listening now, you feel both truths binding together. The men's faces glow faintly in torchlight. One grips his mug so tightly the froth spills over his knuckles. Another keeps tugging at his hood, as though hiding could shield him from the sickness. You see fear etched into their postures, even as they try to mask it with bravado. One man mutters, "The apothecary swears garlic and vinegar cure it." The others laugh harshly, though their eyes dart nervously. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some towns, people carried posies of herbs in their pockets, believing the scent would drive away death. Children even sang about it, though the tune twisted into something darker centuries later. You picture those flowers wilting in the cold night air, whirless against invisible ruin. "If garlic could cure half our problems, I'd eat the market bare," you whisper, half to yourself, half as joke number 1. The words taste bitter, but a smile tugs anyway. The nobleman snores loudly behind you, oblivious to the fear curling through the streets. Your first guest lifts his head at the noise from outside, eyes wide. "Did you hear them?" he whispers. You nod slowly. He swallows hard, then mutters, "Maybe it won't reach here." His tone is thin, stretched by hope. You lean against the shutter, watching the three men scatter into the night like startled crows. "Maybe," you reply, though inside you know rumors rarely die quietly. You return to the table, setting down the cup, though you can't bring yourself to drink. The salted fish bones from earlier still reek faintly in the bucket, mixing with the herbs burned on the dish. You wrinkle your nose and mutter, "If the plague doesn't get me, the smell might." That's joke number 2, softer, meant to soothe yourself more than your guest. The candle guttering on the table throws shadows across the wall. One flickers into the shape of a hooded figure, and you stare at it too long, imagining it as Death himself peering in through your shutter. You shake your head, scolding yourself for indulging in childish fears. Still, the thought lingers. Historians debate whether people in these times believed plague to be punishment from God or simply bad air. You suspect it was both, because nothing terrifies like punishment you can neither see nor fight. The guest clears his throat nervously, breaking the silence. "My cousin says the sickness makes the skin turn black," he blurts, as though saying it aloud will make it less real. You sigh, then force a half-smile. "Well, at least it saves on coal for face paint." Joke number 3, macabre, but enough to make him snort softly despite his fear. You sit back on the bed, pulling the shawl tight, letting the night air settle heavy against the walls. The nobleman shifts in his sleep, coins spilling from his pocket to the floor. You scoop them up absent-mindedly, stacking them on the table with steady hands, though your thoughts are elsewhere. Beyond the alley, the rumours spread like fire in dry grass, each whisper carrying more weight than the last. And though the sickness may not yet have reached your street, its shadow already lies across your chamber, darker than any torch could chase away. The candle sputters once more, then steadies, as though refusing to die. You take a slow breath, settling yourself, preparing for whatever the night delivers next. The night stretches on, sticky with silence after the rumours of plague. Your guest sits hunched on the stool, chewing his lip as though trying to bite down on fear itself. The nobleman still snores, sprawled across your bed like a toppled statue, one boot dangling off the side. You pour what's left of the wine into your cup, though the sour taste does little to ease the tension twisting in your belly. Then a sound, clinking metal, steady, deliberate. You glance toward the door just as a heavy knock lands, not hesitant this time, but strong and purposeful. You freeze, hand hovering over the latch, while your guest stiffens like a rabbit hearing a hawk overhead. The knock comes again, and with it, a voice, calm, low, carrying authority. "Open." You steel yourself, unlatch the door, and pull it wide. Standing in the threshold is a knight. His armour gleams faintly in the moonlight, though the edges are worn, dented from use. His helm is tucked under one arm, his other hand resting casually on the hilt of his sword. A teal surcoat drapes over his chest plate, marked with a faded sigil. His eyes, sharp, pale, scan the room in a single sweep, landing finally on you. Mainstream histories often describe knights as noble protectors, symbols of chivalry and law. Yet, seeing this man framed in your doorway, you feel no fairy tale, just the weight of another stranger entering your fragile space. Historians still argue whether knights ever upheld vows of purity and honour, or whether they were simply mercenaries with shinier boots. Judging by the way his coin pouch clinks as he steps inside, you're leaning toward the latter. The nobleman groans in drunken sleep, oblivious, while your first guest shrinks further into the corner. The knight ignores them both, removing his gauntlets with slow precision, as though each movement were part of a ritual. You half expect him to bark orders or demand favours, but instead he speaks softly. "Tell me a story." The request catches you off guard. You blink, unsure if you heard correctly. He sets his helm on the table with a thud and repeats, "Not service, a story." His voice is even, steady, but carries the faint tremor of exhaustion. You ease into the chair opposite him, the candle casting a glow over his scarred face. "What kind of story?" you ask cautiously. He leans back, eyes narrowing in thought. "One where the hero does not win." His words settle into the air like falling ash, heavy and unexpected. A quirky tidbit drifts into memory. Some chroniclers claimed knights in long campaigns grew hungry not only for food or drink, but for words. They'd pay scribes or minstrels for tales to dull the silence of endless marches. Perhaps tonight you are his minstrel. You chuckle softly and say, "Lucky for you, I'm full of stories where no one wins." Joke number 1, and though grim, it draws the ghost of a smile across his lips. You begin to weave a tale about a farmer who dreamed of escaping his fields, only to find the city no kinder than the soil. Your voice slows, smoothing itself into rhythm. The knight listens intently, hands clasped, shoulders relaxing with each word. Your guest in the corner watches in silence, eyes wide as though this shift in the room bewilders him. Even the nobleman stirs less, his snores softening as though soothed by your cadence. The knight interrupts once, murmuring, "Did the farmer fight?" You shake your head. "No, he endured." That answer seems to satisfy him, though his gaze drifts into some private battlefield only he can see. You end the story quietly, letting silence pool in the room like cooling wax. The knight exhales, long and low, and for a moment the clang of armor feels like it has dissolved into the hush of shared breath. You lean back, quipping softly, "Cheaper than a bard, but no loot included." Joke number 2, wry and pointed, enough to earn a faint chuckle. He reaches into his pouch and sets 2 coins on the table. More than enough for words. You blink at them, surprised, then nod your thanks. He rises, collecting his helm, and pauses at the door. "Tell another when I return," he says simply. Then, with the clink of armor, he steps back into the night. The chamber feels strange in his absence, lighter yet marked. You shake your head and murmur, "Imagine that, nights hungry for bedtime stories." Joke number 3 whispered into the shadows, and this time it makes you laugh softly, as if you too were soothed by your own tale. The night's departure leaves behind a silence almost reverent, broken only by the nobleman's wheezing snores. You sit motionless for a time, watching the 2 coins he left gleam faintly in the candlelight, as though their shine holds back the dark. Then, far in the distance, a sound rolls through the city, the tolling of the great bell. Its deep clang trembles through the stone walls and into your bones. Once, twice, again. Curfew. You close your eyes briefly, feeling the weight of it. With each strike, the city gates swing shut, chains rattling, iron biting against iron. Beyond the walls, travelers are trapped in the dark wilderness. Within, townsfolk are locked into whatever fate the night has chosen for them. Mainstream histories describe curfew bells as a practical tool, protection against thieves, fires, unrest. Yet living here, you know they are less a shield than a lock. Historians still argue whether these bells brought safety or fear. In this moment, the echo feels more like a cage door slamming shut. Your guest, still perched uneasily on the stool, flinches at the sound. "We can't leave now," he whispers, though no one was trying to. You glance at him, shrugging lightly. "Where would you go? The rats have all the best seats outside." Joke number 1, tossed gently to ease his nerves, and it earns a shaky smile. Through the shutter's cracks, you glimpse the glow of torches as guards secure the gate at the alley's end. Their movements are clumsy, slowed by wine and weariness, yet the chains bite shut all the same. A dog barks in protest, the sound swallowed quickly by the next toll. You wonder if the bell tolls louder in the minds of those caught outside, merchants begging at the locked gates, travellers shivering in roadside ditches, lovers separated by seconds too late. A quirky tidbit floats into memory. In some towns, bells were rung not only for curfew B, but to chase demons out of the streets. The clamour was thought to frighten spirits into retreat. You smirk at the thought, murmuring, "If noise chased demons away, half the taverns would be holy." That's joke number 2, and this time you laugh quietly to yourself, though the sound feels swallowed by the still air. The nobleman on your bed groans, rolling over. A coin slips from his cloak and clinks onto the floor. You retrieve it, slipping it into your pouch, though your hand lingers on the cold metal longer than necessary. Coins mean food, safety, a scrap of control, but they also mean you're tethered here. You sigh, tracing the rim of the coin before setting it aside. Your guest leans forward, voice hushed. What if the sickness comes with the night? His question trembles like a loose shutter. You meet his eyes and answer dryly. Then at least the bells gave it permission. Joke number 3, dark but steady, though his laughter is more a cough than amusement. Still, it breaks the silence enough to breathe again. The bell's last toll fades into the night, leaving only echoes that seem to cling to the stones. Beyond the walls, the wilderness yawns wide and unseen. Within, the city folds into itself like a beast curling into slumber. You know that for some, the bell is comfort, a lullaby of safety. For you, it is a reminder, no escape until dawn. You sit back on your straw bed, pulling the shawl tight, letting the silence resettle. Outside, the town has been sealed shut, and inside the night stretches onward thick and unyielding. Whatever comes now, client, rumour, plague or dream, you face it within these walls, chained as firmly as the gates themselves. The silence after the bell toll doesn't last long. From the alley comes a new sound, uneven footsteps, loud voices slurred with drink. You tense instantly, recognizing the jagged rhythm of returning clients. The nobleman still sprawls across your bed, oblivious in his stupor, while the first guest stiffens, eyes darting toward the door. You motion for him to stay put, though your own heart thumps hard enough to shake your ribs. The voices grow nearer, rough laughter echoing off the stone. 2 figures stumble into view through the shutter's crack. Men you know all too well. Their cloaks hang crooked, one with a dagger clutched loosely in his fist, the other dragging a wineskin that leaks with every sway. They shove each other playfully, though the play is sharp, bordering on cruel. Mainstream history often reduces such men to faceless rabble, drunken townsfolk haunting alleys. But to you, they're more than that. They're the embodiment of risk, men who return not to pay again, but to take, to threaten, to remind you that the walls of your chamber are paper-thin against rage. They pound on the door, harder this time, rattling the hinges. You exchange a glance with your guest, his face pale, eyes wide. You whisper, "Quiet," and step closer to the door. Another slam, followed by a shout, "We know you're in there." Their voices drip with wine and menace. Historians still argue whether brothel women had protection against such men or whether they stood alone. Tonight, with the guards long gone and the gates locked, you feel the answer clear. The pounding continues and you raise your voice just enough to carry. "Go sleep it off before you break your nose on my door." That's joke number 1, sharp as flint, though it only earns a harsher laugh from the other side. One mutters something about owing them from a past night, false but convenient for their fury. Your guest grip. As the stool, ready to throw it if they break in. You shake your head slightly, urging him to wait. You can hear the scrape of the dagger against wood as one drags its tip across your door. The sound is deliberate, meant to carve fear as much as scratches. A quirky tidbit flickers in your mind. Some women kept buckets of slop near their doors to dump on men who wouldn't leave. Tonight you wish you had one ready. You whisper, if only garlic water worked on pests of all kinds. Joke number 2 slips bitterly just for yourself. The banging pauses. For a moment, silence presses in, broken only by drunken breathing. Then one of them laughs again, high and ugly, before staggering off down the alley. The second lingers, muttering curses, but at last his footsteps fade too. You don't breathe until the sound has vanished completely. You lean your forehead against the door, exhaling slowly. Your shawl has slipped from your shoulders, leaving gooseflesh rising along your arms. Behind you, your guest sets the stool back down, his hands trembling. The nobleman continues to snore, unbothered by danger that nearly spilled through the door. You mutter, he could sleep through the end of the world. That's joke number 3, weary but pointed, and it makes your guest chuckle weakly, despite his shaking. Historians debate whether fear of violence was constant or occasional for women in your trade. Tonight, with the echo of fists still ringing in the wood, it feels like both. You pull the shawl tight again, sinking onto the straw bed, heart still pounding. Outside, the alley has gone quiet, but you know it's only a fragile quiet, ready to break with the next set of footsteps. For now, though, you're still standing, the door is still closed, and that, in this narrow world of shadows, is a victory worth clinging to. The pounding on your door fades into memory, but the echo still lingers in your chest like a second heartbeat. You sit at the table, rubbing your temples, when a softer sound interrupts the shuffle of familiar steps. This time there's no drunken bellow, no angry fists, just a gentle tap. You hesitate, then open the door to find a woman you know well. The midwife, a healer of sorts, though her remedies often lean more on superstition than science. She smiles faintly, her russet cloak drawn tight, and slips inside without waiting for permission. She carries a leather pouch slung at her hip, bulging with small jars, herbs and charms. As she settles onto the stool, she begins pulling out her wares, laying them across the table like treasures. Sprigs of dried sage tied with string, little packets of powdered roots, a vial of dark liquid that smells faintly of iron. She places them carefully, as though each object holds not only weight but meaning. Mainstream histories often describe medieval healers as wise women, keepers of knowledge in a world of ignorance, yet reality is murkier. Historians still argue whether they were skilled herbalists, lucky guessers, or merely peddlers of hope. Watching her now, you suspect she is a mix of all three. You lean forward, curious despite yourself. She picks up a small pouch, shaking it gently. Charms, she explains, for luck or for keeping sickness away. You arch an eyebrow, muttering, if they work, you'll be richer than the king. That's joke number 1. And she chuckles softly, though her eyes remain serious. She slides a jar toward you, its lid sealed with wax. Powdered betony, she says. Good for headaches, good for fevers, good for almost anything if you believe hard enough. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some chroniclers claimed betony could cure as many as 40 ailments, from snake bites to bad dreams. You turn the jar in your hands, marvelling at how one dusty powder could hold such promise or such falsehood. Your guest, still seated nervously in the corner, leans forward. Do you have anything for plague? His voice cracks on the last word. The healer's eyes flicker, then she nods slowly, producing another vial. This one holds a cloudy liquid that smells of vinegar and rosemary. She places it down gently. To hang above your door, she says. It may not stop death, but it might stop fear. You sigh and murmur, well, if it doesn't work, at least the smell will. That's joke number 2, though your voice carries more weariness than mirth. The healer pulls out one last item, a tiny cloth bundle tied with red thread. She presses it into your hand. Keep this under your pillow, she whispers. It will chase away bad spirits. You feel the weight of it, absurdly light, like hope wrapped in scraps. You look at her and smile faintly. I'll take any spirit chasing I can get, except the wine spirits. I need those. Joke number 3 slips free, finally earning a real laugh from both her and your guest. She gathers the rest of her wares, tucking them back into her pouch. Coins change hands, though fewer than she deserves. Still, she accepts them with a nod, her expression unreadable. At the door, she pauses, glancing back. "The night is long," she says softly. "Keep the charm close." And then she slips out, swallowed by the alley's shadows. You sit at the table, holding the small cloth bundle in your hand. Its weight is laughably slight, yet you clutch it as though it were gold. Historians debate whether such charms worked through faith, placebo, or simple comfort. You suspect the answer doesn't matter. In nights like these, survival is as much belief as it is bread. You tuck the bundle beneath your pillow, whispering a quiet prayer not to saints but to chance itself. The candle flick. Curs, the nobleman snores, your guest sighs, and you, clutching a charm against the dark, remind yourself that sometimes illusions are the strongest medicine you have. The healer's visit leaves the room steeped in herbs and smoke, but your mind drifts somewhere else entirely. You lie back on the straw bed, the charm tucked under your pillow, and for the first time all night your thoughts wander beyond the alley, beyond the town, to the fields you once knew. The memory rises like a dream you can almost taste. You see yourself barefoot in the tall grass of summer, the sun spilling gold over the wheat. The air is thick with the hum of bees, the scent of cut hay, the laughter of children running after geese with sticks. Your fingers curl, remembering the rough stalks between them, softer than the splinters of your bed. Mainstream histories speak of peasants chained to the land, bound by endless labour. Yet your memory feels brighter, gentler, a place where hunger was a neighbour, but not yet a master. Historians still argue whether those fields were truly freer than the city, or if nostalgia paints them sweeter than they were. Tonight, in your weary mind, they gleam like heaven. You remember your mother's voice calling you back from the stream, her apron dusted with flour. She would wave her wooden spoon like a sword, threatening mock punishment if you dawdled too long. You smile faintly at the thought. Imagine, feared more by a spoon than by a knight, you whisper. Joke number 1, soft and fond, and it makes your chest ache more than it amuses. The memory shifts to your father, bent over the plough, shoulders darkened by sun. His boots sank into the earth, each step a battle with stubborn soil. You remember bringing him a drink of water in a wooden cup, his rough hand ruffling your hair in thanks. You did not know then how much that hand carried, how much it shielded you from. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some country folk swore that singing to crops made them grow stronger, that the rhythm of voices tied the earth to human will. Eureka! Well, the songs you sang, nonsense rhymes mostly, but in memory they sound like magic, threads binding you to the soil. Perhaps that was your first stage, performing for fields that clapped with rustling leaves. Your guest on the stool notices your faraway expression. "What are you thinking of?" he asks softly. You hesitate, then answer. "Home." He tilts his head. "Do you miss it?" You sigh. "Every night, and never." The words feel strange even as you say them. City walls stole you from those fields, but time has stolen them too, reshaping them into something that only exists in memory. You chuckle faintly, muttering, "The fields never asked for coin, at least. Just sweat." That's joke number 2, though it lands more bitter than playful. Still, your guest smiles, understanding enough to let silence carry the rest. The candle flickers low, and in its unsteady glow you imagine the horizon again, the sweep of green, the endless sky unbroken by stone walls. You smell the faint sweetness of hay, hear the creak of the old well, feel the mud cool between your toes. For a moment, the chamber disappears, replaced by open air and the sound of geese honking at dusk. Historians debate whether those who left the land carried regret, or whether survival dulled nostalgia into numbness. You suspect both can be true. The city swallowed you, but the fields still bloom in your dreams, stubborn as weeds. You murmur to yourself, maybe I'll plant a garden in a chamber pot, bring the fields back here. Joke number 3 whispered into the dark, and it almost makes you laugh. Almost. The charm beneath your pillow feels warm now, as though it's caught a spark of memory. You close your eyes, clutching the thought of fields, of geese, of laughter long gone. The night outside may be heavy, but in your mind the harvest sun still burns bright. The memory of golden fields still lingers, soft as smoke, when a new sound pulls you back into the cramped chamber, the delicate rustle of parchment. You blink and turn toward the doorway where another visitor has slipped in. This one isn't loud or drunken. He moves with quiet care, his teal robe gathered neatly, a satchel slung across his shoulder. His face is pale, framed by ink stains on his fingers, and in his hand he carries a folded sheet of parchment, a scholar by the look of him, though what he's doing in your alley at this hour is anyone's guess. He bows his head slightly, not with arrogance, but with a gentleness unusual for this place. "Forgive the intrusion," he murmurs, "but I was told you listen." His voice is soft, more accustomed to libraries than taverns. He steps closer, placing the parchment on the table with reverence, as though it were holy. The nobleman still snores behind you, oblivious, while your first guest watches silently, brow furrowed. You unfold the parchment carefully, the candlelight revealing neat, flowing script. It's a poem, not a prayer, not a contract, not a tally of coin, but words curved into verse, fragile as spider silk. You read the first lines aloud, your voice catching, metaphors of stars, of rivers, of fleeting beauty. Mainstream history often records scholars as dry men of law and theology, yet here is one writing poetry for someone like you. Historians still argue whether such verses were genuine affection or simply another mask of desire. You don't know, but tonight they feel like both. The scholar watches, his hands trembling as though he's given you a piece of himself. You glance up, half smiling. Careful, words can be more dangerous than swords. That's joke number 1, though it lands softly, not sharp. He chuckles, nodding in agreement. You continue reading, the lines painting images of dawn over stone walls. Oh, of laughter echoing down riverside paths. You wonder if he ever lived these moments, or if he only dreamed them from behind dusty tomes. A quirky tidbit drifts to mind. In some towns, women like you were paid to memorize verses for clients, reciting them back like living books. Tonight, though, the verse feels less transaction and more confession. Your guest on the stool leans forward, curiosity breaking through his nerves. "It's beautiful," he whispers. You nod slowly, folding the parchment once more. You hand it back to the scholar, but he shakes his head. "It's yours." The words settle heavier than coins. You laugh faintly, holding the parchment to your chest. "I can't eat poetry, you know." Joke number 2, half bitter, half tender. And it makes the scholar smile sadly. The nobleman snorts in his sleep, rolling over with a groan, breaking the fragile spell. For a heartbeat, the chamber feels ridiculous. Poetry read aloud while a drunk noble drools on your bed. The absurdity makes you grin, and you murmur, "If he wakes, I'll tell him the poem was written for him." Joke number 3, whispered just for yourself, and you have to stifle your laugh to keep from waking him. The scholar rises slowly, adjusting his robe. He bows again, deeper this time, his pale face softened by candlelight. "Keep it," he says quietly, gesturing to the parchment. "Sometimes words are worth more than coin." Then, without waiting for reply, he slips out into the alley, his footsteps fading into the night. You hold the parchment in your hands, the ink still smelling faintly of oak gall and candle smoke. You tuck it carefully beneath your shawl, near the charm from the healer, near the memories you carry from the fields. Historians debate whether women in your world ever found hope in such fragile gifts. Tonight, you decide the debate doesn't matter. Tonight, you have a poem, and for a few moments that feels like enough. The parchment rests against your chest, its folded corners pressing lightly through your shawl. You sit in the quiet chamber, staring at the candle's flame, when the first toll of morning bells drifts faintly across the rooftops. Not yet dawn, but close. The hour when priests stir, when bakers stoke fires, when the city yawns awake. The sound is soft, distant, yet it lands heavy, like guilt threading itself through your bones. You close your eyes and listen. Each clang rolls outward, echoing down alleys, bouncing off walls. In churches scattered across the town, priests are preparing to chant prayers. You imagine them lifting golden chalices, raising their hands to a God who already knows your name but not your story. Mainstream history paints these bells as calls to devotion, a gentle summons to the faithful. Yet for you, each peal feels like accusation. Historians still argue whether such rituals offered comfort or control. This morning, the bells feel more whip than balm. Your guest stirs on the stool, rubbing his eyes, his expression caught between exhaustion and shame. The nobleman groans in his stupor, muttering nonsense before lapsing back into snores. You stand, stretching sore limbs, and drift to the shutter. The sky outside is paling, streaks of grey cutting into the black. The world beyond your chamber is waking, while you remain tangled in the remnants of night. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some chroniclers noted that women of your trade were forbidden to enter churches except on certain feast days, as though sin carried its own timetable. You think of the small chapel you visited before, its incense, its scolding priest. Would he frown harder if he knew you sat here now, listening to the same bells he hears? Probably. You smirk softly. Imagine priests charging admission to forgiveness. First come, first saved. That's joke number one, wry but enough to ligs. Imagine your chest. You step back from the shutter, wrapping the shawl tighter. The parchment slips slightly beneath it, and you adjust it carefully, unwilling to crease it more. The poem feels fragile, precious, yet ridiculous all the same, an island of tenderness in a sea of survival. You shake your head and murmur, words don't fill bellies, but at least they don't tax them. Joke number two, spoken quietly, and it makes your guest smile faintly despite his weariness. The bells toll again, louder now, a rhythm that demands attention. You picture the townsfolk outside, wives herding children, merchants unlocking stalls, beggars claiming corners. The city is waking into its routines, and you will be left with coins, fatigue, and the sour reek of spilled wine. You wonder, not for the first time, whether anyone else feels this divide so sharply, the world rising clean while you are left to sweep the ashes of night. Your guest shifts uncomfortably. Do you think God listens to them? He asks suddenly. You tilt your head, surprised by the question. Maybe, you reply softly. Or maybe he listens to everyone, just not at the same volume. Joke number three, though it carries more ache than humour, and the man chuckles weakly before burying his face in his hands. The bells ring one final time, the last clang hanging in the air like a thread before snapping into silence. You sit back on the bed, staring at the ceiling beams blackened with smoke. The guilt lingers, but so does defiance. The world outside may be drenched in prayers, but here, in your small chamber, you hold on to something else. Coins, charms, scraps of bread, and now a folded poem that hums like a secret against your heart. The bells may toll for devotion, but you decide their sound will be your reminder, not of sin, not of punishment, but of survival through another endless night. The bells have faded, leaving behind a strange hush that clings to the chamber like smoke. You sit at the table again, pulling the pouch of coins toward you. The leather is cracked, the drawstring frayed, but what matters lies inside. You untie it slowly, the jingle of metal loud in the silence. One by one, you tip the coins onto the wooden surface. They scatter unevenly, clinking against each other before settling into a small pile. Silver from the nobleman gleams brighter than the dull copper from your first guest. You separate them, stacking neat towers with deliberate care, as though order could disguise scarcity. Mainstream histories say women of your trade were flush with wealth, dripping with jewelry, their purses always heavy. Yet the truth feels grimmer. Coin arrives in bursts, but it leaks away faster than water through a cracked jug. Historians still argue whether the wealth stayed with the women themselves or simply funneled upward to madams, landlords, and officials. As you count, the answer seems obvious enough. Your guest watches silently, his face caught between shame and curiosity. You don't shoo him away. Instead, you hold up a coin and say, "Survival flattened into circles. Funny how little it weighs." Joke number 1, dry and sharp, though your smile softens the edge. You make a small pile labelled in your head, food, another, candles, a third, the madam's cut. Each tower shrinks as quickly as it grows. You mutter under your breath, if only bread grew as fast as debts. Joke number 2, whispered bitterly, though your guest gives a nervous laugh. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some brothels, women hid coins in their hair or stitched them into hems, sewing silver into the lining of gowns so madams couldn't seize every last scrap. You finger the edge of your shawl, imagining a hidden fortune stitched there, though in truth the cloth is too thin in for such tricks. The nobleman stirs on the bed, rolling over with a groan. You freeze, but he only mutters and sinks deeper into snores. A coin slips from his cloak again, clinking onto the floor. You scoop it up, smiling faintly. See, even asleep he contributes to the cause. Joke number 3, softer, more amused than bitter. Your guest leans forward, voice low. What will you do with it all? You glance at the pitiful stacks, then shrug. Eat, live, repeat. The words taste flat, but they're true. You push one small coin toward him, surprising yourself. He blinks, confused. For bread, you say simply. He hesitates, then accepts, his eyes shining faintly with gratitude, or perhaps shame. You continue sorting until the last coin lies flat on the table. The towers are small, fragile, like sandcastles waiting for the tide. Yet you stare at them with a strange sense of triumph. They may not promise freedom, but they promise another day, and in this world, that is victory enough. Historians debate whether survival counted as success for women like you, or whether only escape could be called triumph. Tonight, you know escape is a dream too far. But as you gather the coins back into the pouch, tie the frayed string and tuck it close, you feel a flicker of pride. You endured, you earned, you counted. The candle burns low, wax dripping in slow rivers down its side. The chamber smells of herbs, wine, and faint smoke, but the scent of coin, metallic, sharp, dominates your senses now. You slip the pouch beneath your shawl, pressing it against your chest like armor. Whatever tomorrow brings, you will face it with these small circles of survival clinking faintly at your side. The coins rest safely in your pouch, their faint weight pressing against your ribs like reassurance. But even with that fragile comfort, you know what waits outside. Daylight is crawling closer, and with it comes not just priests and bakers, but the endless churn of gossip. The marketplace, so quiet earlier, is about to roar back to life, and you can already picture the whispers that spread faster than smoke. You step to the shutter and push it open a crack. The alley is grey with dawn, mist clinging to the cobblestones. Beyond, you glimpse the square, butchers setting up their stalls, bakers brushing flour from their aprons, fishmongers unloading baskets of yesterday's catch. Yet it isn't just food that fills the market, it's stories. Mainstream histories often call marketplaces centres of trade, hubs of commerce. That's true, but they were also the printing presses of the poor, the rumour mills that spun faster than any scribe's pen. Historians still argue whether gossip shaped society more than law itself. You don't need the debate, you live the proof. Already you can hear it starting. A baker leans to the butcher, muttering about sinful women keeping half the guard's purse. The butcher grunts, chopping at his block with heavy blows. A fishwife adds her piece, swearing she saw a cloaked noble stumble from your alley just before dawn. Her voice is sharp, cutting through the morning air like her knife through scales. You chuckle bitterly and murmur, "Ah, our unpaid town criers, always ready with news." That's joke number 1, though it tastes sour in your mouth. Your guest sits stiffly on the stool, listening with wide eyes. He asks, "Do they really speak of you that way, every morning?" You nod, watching the mist roll away. Every morning, every noon, every dusk. If gossip were grain, this city would never go hungry. Joke number 2 slips free, lighter this time. Oh, and he almost laughs despite himself. A quirky tidbit flickers in your mind. In some towns, authorities posted public notices warning citizens not to consort with women like you. But the irony, half the names muttered in the market belong to those very officials. You imagine the fishwife pointing at the sheriff in the crowd, hissing, "He was here last night," while selling her herring. The thought makes you smirk, if only for a moment. The nobleman groans in his sleep, rolling over, and you mutter under your breath, "If he snores loud enough, even the market will know." Joke number 3, tossed at the absurdity of it all, and it makes your guest snicker softly. The shutters rattle as the morning breeze picks up, carrying the sharper scents of onions, raw meat, and horse dung. Beneath it all runs the tang of rumour, invisible yet heavy, seeping through cracks like smoke. You imagine the townsfolk shaping your life with each careless word, crafting a story in which you're both villain and entertainment. Historians debate whether gossip ruined reputations permanently or merely kept people in their proper place. You suspect both are true. For the butcher, the fishwife, the baker, it costs nothing to stain you with whispers. But for you, each word lingers, sticking like soot to your skin. You shut the shutter firmly, leaning your forehead against the wood. Inside, the candle's glow softens the edges of the room, and for a moment you pretend it shields you from the market's noise. Yet you know the truth. When you step outside again, the stories will already be written, and you will carry them whether you want to or not. For now, though, you breathe in the quieter air of your chamber and let the gossip swirl without you. Coins jingle faintly at your side, the only rebuttal you can ever afford. The gossip clings to the shutters like damp mist, but another sound soon intrudes, the heavy stomp of boots in the alley, not the uncertain shuffle of a drunk nor the steady rhythm of a knight. This tread is deliberate, slower, and carries the weight of authority. You stiffen, already knowing who it is before the knock rattles your door. When you unlatch it, the bailiff stands there, broad shoulders filling the frame. His cloak is black, lined with fur, worn thin, his face ruddy from wine or anger, or both. At his belt dangles a set of keys, each one clinking as he shifts. His eyes sweep your chamber without invitation, lingering on the snoring nobleman sprawled across your bed, then sliding to your guest hunched on the stool. His lips curl in a faint smirk. "Busy night," he mutters, stepping inside without waiting. Mainstream histories describe bailiffs as enforcers of law, guardians of civic order. But here, in the cramped glow of your chamber, you know the sharper truth. Their law bends with coin, and their order is whatever serves their purse. Historians still argue whether bailiffs acted more like protectors or predators. Tonight, the answer feels obvious. He moves to the table, eyeing the pouch of coins you tucked away. You know the rules, he says flatly. A share for the peace of the street. His hand extends, palm open, expectant. Your jaw tightens. The nobleman snorts in his sleep, oblivious, while your guest shrinks further into his corner. You slide 2 coins across the table, watching them glint in the candlelight. The bailiff raises an eyebrow, unimpressed. 2, he drawls. You smile thinly and mutter, 2 more than the bishop gave me. That's joke number 1, sharp enough to sting, though he only chuckles, scooping up the silver. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some towns, bailiffs were accused of keeping brothels themselves, skimming profits while pretending to enforce morality. You look at the man before you and think, not for the first time, that rumour is often truer than law. He turns toward your guest, eyes narrowing. And you, the man stammers, fumbling in his pouch, producing a single copper coin. The bailiff takes it with a sneer as though insulted by its smallness. He pockets it anyway because greed never refuses. Your anger simmers, but you force your voice calm. The law must be hungry to eat scraps like ours. Joke number 2, laced with bitterness, but the bailiff only smirks, tucking the coins into his belt. The candle sputters, wax dripping like tears down its side. The bailiff lingers a moment longer, eyes drifting to the parchment still half visible under your shawl. He snorts. Poems now? Waste of ink. His laughter is short, sharp, then gone. He steps back toward the door, coins jingling with each stride. Historians debate whether such men were feared more than thieves. For you, there is no debate. At least thieves don't pretend their theft is holy. You bite your tongue, forcing a small smile as he pauses in the doorway. Keep your street quiet, he warns, or next time the fine doubles. Then he's gone, swallowed by the alley's dim light. You slump into the chair, shoulders sagging. Your guest exhales shakily while the nobleman rolls over and snores louder, as if mocking the whole scene. You shake your head and murmur, "At least he didn't fine us for breathing." That's joke number 3, weary but enough to make your guest laugh softly despite his pale face. The door shuts, but the air feels heavier, tainted by the bailiff's shadow. You press the pouch of coins tighter against your chest, painfully aware of how quickly survival shrinks beneath the weight of authority. The chamber seems smaller now, walls closer, the candles glow feebler, and still, outside, the town Pomos arches on, its laws measured not in justice but in silver. The bailiff's shadow still lingers in the chamber long after his boots have clattered down the alley. You sit at the table, shoulders tense, staring at the faint marks his hand left in the dust of your wood. Your guest is silent, the nobleman still snoring, but you are not alone in this unease. A soft knock at the back entrance pulls your attention, and when you open it, 2 of the other women slip inside. Their faces are drawn, eyes dark with fatigue, yet their movements are purposeful. They don't need to explain why they've come. You know already. After nights like this, raids, bribes, threats, something always follows. The unspoken ritual of sisterhood. You shut the door behind them, and together you gather near the candle, its flame small but steady. One of the women, her russet gown patched at the hem, sets a loaf of bread on the table. Another pulls out a flask of thin ale. You add your pouch of coins, laying it open like an offering. No one touches anything yet. Instead, you sit in silence, breathing together, letting the presence itself be the comfort. Mainstream histories often gloss over such moments, preferring the lurid to the loyal. Yet here lies the truth, rarely written. When the world sharpens its teeth, women in your place turn toward one another, not away. Historians still argue whether brothel houses were nests of rivalry or webs of solidarity. Tonight, the answer is clear. One woman breaks the silence first. "The bailiff came to me yesterday," she mutters, her voice low. "Took half my coin, said it was a fine for singing too loud." You snort bitterly, muttering, "Imagine, music outlawed, greed rewarded." Joke number 1, sharp but shared, and the women chuckle despite themselves. The second woman pours a bit of ale into a cracked cup, passing it around. Each sip is small, but the ritual is larger than thirst. It is communion. She leans in, whispering, "We should keep watch for each other when the guards pass, when men grow angry." The words hum like a promise, heavy but hopeful. You nod and add your own thought. "We can stitch a signal into our gowns, a bit of teal cloth at the hem. If one of us is cornered, the others will know." They murmur agreement, the idea settling like stone in the foundation of a wall. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some guilds used secret signs to mark loyalty. Chalk symbols, coloured strings, quiet ways of declaring unity. You realise you are building a guild of your own, though no charter will ever record it. Your guest listens quietly from the stool, wide-eyed, as if witnessing something sacred. The nobleman snores louder, his presence absurd against the weight of the moment. You grin wryly, whispering, "Perhaps we should recruit him too. He'd scare anyone off with his snoring." That's joke number 2, and it draws a ripple of laughter that eases the air. The bread is broken and shared, each woman taking a piece. The act feels ancient, binding. As crumbs fall to the table, you find yourself saying, "We cannot fight hunger or men or law alone, but together we can last longer." The others nod, their gazes steady, shoulders squaring with renewed resolve. Finally, you press your pouch shut, tying the frayed string tighter. "If one of us has too much," you say, "she will give. If one of us has too little, she will take. That is our pact." The words hang in the candlelight, a fragile vow woven from survival. You smirk, adding lightly, "Of course, if anyone cheats, we'll haunt her with garlic breath until the end of days." Joke number 3, sealing the pact not with solemnity alone but with shared laughter. The sound warms the room, weaving strength into weary bones. Historians debate whether such pacts truly existed or whether they are myths embroidered onto history. But Yuka, now, sitting here with bread, ale and whispered loyalty, that myth and truth often share the same face. The women leave before dawn, their steps quiet in the alley, their shoulders straighter than when they arrived. You watch them go, the chamber feeling both emptier and stronger in their absence. You know now that whatever the night brings, guard, plague or bailiff, you will not stand alone. The chamber feels lighter after the pact. Though the candle burns low, its flame trembling in the draught like it too fears extinguishing. You sit again at the table, staring at the scraps left from shared bread, when the thought of protection stirs in your mind. Words and loyalty are strong, yes, but sometimes survival demands something stranger. You pull a small wooden box from beneath your bed, its lid warped, and set it before you. Inside are the odd mixtures you've collected over time, charms and remedies whispered from one woman to another. Small packets of crushed herbs, a lump of beeswax, a vial of cloudy vinegar, even a scrap of dried lizard's tail tied with string. Mainstream histories dismiss such things as superstition, the foolish toys of desperate women. But here, in the half-dark of your chamber, they are armour. Historians still argue whether these remedies ever held true power or whether belief alone carried them. You suspect the answer doesn't matter. Fear bends to ritual as easily as to reason. You take the beeswax first, softening it with your fingers before smearing it along the cracks of the shutter. Keeps the sickness from crawling in, you whisper, half mocking, half hoping. Then you sprinkle crushed sage across the threshold, the leaves brittle under your fingertips. A quirky tidbit you once heard flickers in your memory. Some swore sage planted outside a house would protect its women from evil men. You don't have a garden, so the floorboards will have to do. Your guest watches, head tilted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Do you believe it works?" he asks. You shrug, smearing vinegar along the doorframe with a rag. "If it doesn't, at least it smells worse than we do." Joke number 1, and it makes him chuckle, though his eyes still hold worry. Next, you pull out a bundle of rosemary bound with red thread. You place it under the nobleman's arm where he snores, muttering, "To keep away nightmares." He snorts, rolls over, and crushes the sprig flat beneath his cloak. You sigh and remark, "Well, if it doesn't help him, at least it'll season his dreams." Joke number 2, and this time even your guest laughs outright. The last item is the dried lizard's tail. You hold it between your fingers, staring at its shriveled form. It looks absurd, like a child's toy forgotten in dust. Still, you tie it to the window latch, whispering a rhyme you barely remember from your childhood. The words feel foolish, yet oddly comforting. You murmur, "If nothing else, it'll frighten the next rat who visits." Joke number 3, half jest, half prayer. The room smells now of vinegar and sage, pungent enough to make your eyes water. You sit back, satisfied in spite of yourself. Ritual complete, the chamber feels changed, not stronger perhaps, but steadier, as though the act itself stitched a new layer of defense around you. Historians debate whether these small acts were survival or superstition. You think perhaps they are both. To smear herbs on a doorframe is to declare, however quietly, that you are not helpless, that you will not simply wait for sickness or law or violence to claim you. That belief, even if absurd, is still a blade sharp enough to wield. You lean back on the straw bed, pulling your shawl tighter, and inhale the sharp, stinging scent of your makeshift fortress. The candle wavers, its wax nearly gone, but the smoke of sage curls upward like a banner of defiance. You close your eyes, letting the smell sting your nose, reminding yourself that tonight you've done what you can, warded with herbs, armed with laughter, bound with loyalty. Whatever creeps through the alley, you will meet it wrapped not only in shawls, but in strange remedies and stubborn will. The vinegar tang and crushed sage still cling to the air, but the chamber begins to settle again into a hush. Outside, the alley is quiet, too quiet, its usual drunken shouts and clattering hooves replaced by the softer noises of sleep. From another room, faint at first, you catch something unexpected, singing. Not the bawdy chants of taverns or the sharp hymns of churches, but low, almost like a lullaby. You pause, leaning closer to the shutter, listening. The voice is feminine, cracked with weariness, but gentle in its rise and fall. The tune drifts through the thin walls like smoke, weaving itself into your chamber. For a moment, the sharp scents of vinegar and sage fade, replaced by a warmth that isn't physical, but felt. Mainstream histories rarely mention such things, songs passed between women in quiet hours. Yet you know they existed, soft rebellions disguised as lullabies. Historians still argue whether such songs were meant to comfort children, soothe themselves, or pass hidden messages. Tonight, you suspect it is all three. The nobleman stirs, muttering nonsense before rolling back into snores. Your guest lifts his head, eyes wide. "What is that?" he whispers. You smile faintly, pressing a finger to your lips. "A song," you murmur. "Not for us, maybe, but we can borrow it." The voice hums a verse about the moon, how it watches, how it forgives. Why? Now close your eyes, letting the melody wash over you. A quirky tidbit flickers in your mind. In some regions, people believed singing at night could call spirits, either good or bad. Maybe that's why the tune feels like both comfort and risk. You grin softly and mutter, "If spirits are listening, at least they'll fall asleep too." That's joke number 1, whispered into the air. Your guest leans back, shoulders easing for the first time in hours. He murmurs, "It reminds me of my mother." His voice cracks, heavy with memory. You nod, though your own thoughts slip elsewhere. Your mother's voice calling you from fields, her songs about harvest and rain. You hadn't realized how long it's been since music felt this close. The singer continues, her notes weaving higher, then dipping low like a lull. You smirk and murmur, "Better than the lute player in the tavern, at least she's in tune." Joke number 2, light, enough to make your guest chuckle softly. The candle sputters, shrinking lower, its wax dripping steadily. You lie back on the straw bed, pulling the shawl over your chest, and let the song paint the chamber softer than any herb could. The nobleman's snores even seem to quiet, as though the melody tames even his drunken lungs. Historians debate whether women's songs were ever recorded, preserved, or whether they vanished with each breath. Listening now, you realize they were never meant to be written down. They were meant to be lived, shared, forgotten, and reborn each night. This one will fade with the dawn, but tonight it stitches warmth into your bones. The voice finally trails off, lingering on one last note before silence closes in again. You exhale slowly, smiling faintly. "There," you whisper. "Cheaper than wine, and no headache in the morning." That's joke number 3, quiet, and your guest laughs under his breath. The chamber sinks into stillness once more, but softer this time, like a blanket tucked around weary shoulders. You let your eyes drift half shut, the lullaby still echoing faintly, a phantom tune that makes the night feel almost merciful. The lullaby fades into silence, and for a time you think perhaps the night will grant you peace. But then comes another sound, a heavy, dragging step outside, followed by the unmistakable rattle of a key fumbling at the latch. You stiffen, exchanging a glance with your guest, but before either of you can move, the door creaks open and a merchant staggers in. His cloak is fine wool, trimmed in saffron thread, but it hangs crooked, soaked with spilled wine. His cheeks are blotched crimson, his eyes half shut, his breath thick with ale. He nearly collapses as he crosses the threshold, slamming the door behind him with clumsy force. You rise instinctively, ready to protest, but the sight of his face stops you. He looks less like a man seeking pleasure and more like one running from ghosts. He collapses onto the stool where your guest had sat, the wood groaning under his weight. The guest slips quickly to the corner, wary, while the nobleman still snores on the bed, oblivious to it all. The merchant slams a purse onto the table, the coins spilling in dull heaps. "I don't care," he slurs, voice hoarse. "Just listen." Mainstream histories often describe merchants as men of rising wealth, clever traders climbing ladders of fortune. But here, in your candlelit chamber, you see another truth. Success soured by loneliness, coin outweighed by despair. Historians still argue whether wealth shielded men from misery or merely gave them a heavier purse to drop when misery came calling. Tonight, the argument feels answered. He mutters confessions, words tumbling out faster than his lips can shape them. He speaks of cheating partners, of debts hidden, of a wife long dead, of children who will not look him in the eye. His hands shake as he lifts the cup of wine you pour, spilling half before it reaches his lips. He drinks anyway, grimacing, then laughs bitterly. You remark softly, "Careful, that wine's strong enough to confess your sins for you." That's joke number 1, and for a moment he even chuckles before collapsing his head into his hands. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some believed drunken confessions carried more weight than sober prayers, as though truth seeped out when wine stripped away lies. Perhaps that's why he's here, spilling secrets into a chamber that smells of herbs and fear. The guest in the corner shifts, uncomfortable. but you motion for him to stay quiet. The merchant keeps talking about cargo lost at sea, about bribes paid to tacksmen, about a brother who took more than his share. His words blur into groans, half speech, half sob. You refill his cup again, watching the wine trickle down his beard. At one point he looks up at you, eyes glassy, and asks, "Do you think God listens?" You shrug gently. If he does, he's got a very full book by now. Joke number 2, wry, and it makes him bark a laugh before slamming the cup down again. He leans back, slumping in the chair, muttering softer now, like a man speaking in his sleep, his confessions slow, each word drawn out until at last his chin drops to his chest. The cup slips from his hand, clattering to the floor. He snores, softer than the nobleman, but still heavy. You look at the heap of coins he left spilled across the table, enough to live another week, maybe 2. But more than that, his muttered truths hang in the air like smoke, as though the chamber itself has absorbed his sins. You shake your head, whispering, "At least he paid in advance for therapy." Joke number 3, dry as straw, and your guest actually snorts with laughter despite the tension. Historians debate whether brothels were places of sin or confession. Watching the merchant slump, drunk and broken, you know they are both, for tonight you are priest, jester, and silent witness all in all. Now, the merchant snores softly now, head drooping forward on the stool, his spilled coins glinting dully in the candlelight. The nobleman sprawls across your bed in his own drunken slumber, and the first guest leans drowsily against the wall, eyelids heavy. For a moment the chamber is full of breathing, some ragged, some steady, like a strange choir of the exhausted. You push yourself to the shutter again, pressing it open just enough to breathe the outside air. The alley beyond is hushed, wrapped in a strange stillness. No more drunken footsteps, no clattering hooves, only the faint cooing of pigeons nesting under eaves, the first heralds of morning. The air carries the smell of damp stone, ashes cooling in hearths, and the faintest trace of baking bread drifting from the square. You close your eyes and inhale deeply, clinging to the comfort of that scent. It means life continues, despite the darkness you've endured. Mainstream histories like to speak of dawn as renewal, as the triumph of light over shadow. Yet you know better. Dawn is not victory, it is reprieve. A pause in the cycle, nothing more. Historians still argue whether mornings in cities like this were times of hope or just the next turn of the wheel. Standing here, candle nearly dead, body aching, you feel it is both. Relief wrapped in inevitability. You chuckle softly, whispering, "The birds are my alarm clock and they don't even take bribes." That's joke number 1, enough to make your guest stir and grin faintly through his drowsiness. You glance back at the room, 2 men asleep, 1 barely awake, and you caught in the centre, the lone keeper of this fragile fortress. The nobleman mutters in his sleep, something about hounds and hunting. The merchant twitches, lips moving as though still confessing to invisible judges. You sigh, rubbing your eyes. "I'm running a tavern, a confessional, and a stable, all in one," you murmur. Joke number 2, whispered with weary humour, and even you smile at its absurd truth. A quirky tidbit rises in your mind. Some believed dawn was the hour when spirits retreated, slipping back into shadows as the first light touched the earth. You imagine unseen figures tiptoeing away from the alleys, grumbling that their shift is over. The thought makes you smirk, though it doesn't quite ease the weight pressing your shoulders. The shutter lets in the faint glow of early grey, painting the room with softer light than the candle ever could. Wax drips in its final pools, the flame guttering but stubborn. You stare at it, murmuring, "Stubborn as me, refusing to go out." Joke number 3, simple but true, and it lingers warmly in your chest. You step back from the shutter, the floor creaking beneath your bare feet. The chamber feels different now, quieter, softer, though still heavy with the smells of wine, herbs, and sweat. The night has not broken you, though it has pressed you into corners more times than you can count. You pull the shawl tighter, letting the faint dawn air brush your face. Historians debate whether nights like these were exceptions or the rule, whether survival in such a place was rare or constant. Looking at the men slumped around you, at the coins scattered, at the faint glow crawling into the alley, you know the truth. Every night is survival, and every dawn is both ending and beginning. The birds outside grow louder, their calls stitching into the quiet like thread through cloth. The smell of baking bread thickens, teasing your empty stomach. You close the shutter gently, retreating into your chamber one last time before the sun rises fully. The quiet before dawn is fragile, but it belongs to you. For now, that is enough. The bird song sharpens, louder now, tugging the night toward its inevitable end. You rise slowly, joints aching from hours spent perched on edge, and push open the shutter once more. Beyond the crooked alley, the horizon glows faintly pink, bleeding into pale gold. Sunrise. The world outside your narrow chamber is waking, while inside the remnants of the night still cling like cobwebs. The nobleman mumbles in his drunken sleep, rolling across your bed, his golden chain twisted like a noose around his neck. The merchant snores, slumped over the table, drool pooling on his sleeve beside scattered coins. Your first guest blinks against the light, rubbing his eyes, uncertain whether to leave or linger. You stand apart from them all, shawl pulled tight, watching as dawn seeps into the stones of the alley. Mainstream histories often frame sunrise as triumph, the banishment of darkness, the gift of a new day. But you know better. Sunrise does not erase what happened in the hours before, it merely hides it beneath fresher shadows. Historians still argue whether mornings brought hope or only exhaustion to those who lived by night. Standing in your chamber now, you feel the tug of both. The alley hums faintly with activity, a baker hauling loaves in wicker baskets, steam rising like incense from fresh bread. A milkmaid calling out as she pours into clay jugs, children darting between stalls laughing. You inhale the scent of baking bread deeply, your stomach growling. At least the bread rises better than I do, you mutter with a smirk. That's joke number one, weary but true. You gather the coins scattered across the table, slipping them into your pouch. Each one clinks like punctuation to the story of your night. You tuck the parchment from the scholar deeper into your shawl, smoothing its folded edges, and feel its weight, lighter than coin, heavier than memory. The charm be 'neath your pillow, the herbs smeared on the shutter, the shared pact with the other women, all fragments of defense against the world waiting outside. The first guest stands, stretching stiffly. His face looks different in the pale dawn, softer, younger, as though the weight of night peeled away for a moment. He murmurs his thanks, awkward but sincere. You nod, replying lightly. Survived the night. Consider it my best service yet. Joke number two, dry but warm, and it earns a small laugh. The merchant stirs, groaning, then slumps back into half-sleep. The nobleman snores on. You leave them be, deciding the daylight can handle what the night has left behind. Instead, you slip into the alley yourself, pulling the shawl over your head. The chill of early morning kisses your cheeks, sharper than any perfume. A quirky tidbit flickers in your memory. Some townsfolk believe slipping into the streets at dawn could wash away sins of the night, the first rays of the sun cleansing unseen stains. You smile faintly at the thought, whispering, if sunlight scrubs souls, mine will need a full scrubbing. Joke number three, soft and half amused, carried into the empty air. The town stirs louder now, carts rumbling, merchants shouting, dogs barking at the bustle. But you turn away from the square, choosing instead the quieter shadows of back lanes. The The night is finally over, though its echoes will cling to you long after. The sunrise spills across the crooked roofs, gilding them briefly like palaces before fading into ordinary stone. You move through the shadows, searching not for glory but for rest. Fragile peace is all the morning promises, and for you that is enough. And now, as the story of the night settles, let the pace soften. You've walked through alleys that creaked with danger, through chambers that held laughter and fear, through moments of hunger and fleeting warmth. But the sun has risen, and with it comes a gentler air. Imagine the cobblestones cooling beneath the morning light, the mist lifting slowly from crooked rooftops, revealing not menace but quiet. Your breath slows as you picture the marketplace filling, not with shouts but with the steady rhythm of ordinary life. Bread set on stalls, water poured into buckets, children tugging at their mothers' skirts. The clamour that once felt harsh now blurs into background hum, a song of survival sung every morning. You are not in danger here, not now. The walls that pressed close all night soften, opening into space where the air is cleaner, the light warmer, the shadows less sharp. The faces you met, the merchant, the knight, the nobleman, the women who shared bread, fade into silhouettes, like figures on parchment. They are no longer pressing, demanding, or frightening. They are memories drifting into calm, leaving you lighter than before. Their voices become whispers, then dissolve, like smoke carried off by dawn's breeze. Now feel your shoulders loosen, your breath deepen. You've endured the night, and that is enough. Let the charm beneath your pillow remain there, not because it has power, but because it reminds you that small comforts matter. Let the parchment with its delicate words lie close, not for meaning but for gentleness. Let the scent of sage and rosemary fade into nothing but clean air. The story closes softly, not with fear, but with release. And as you lie here, you are safe. Let the night go. Let yourself rest. Sweet dreams.